The room was electric, every eye fixed on the confrontation unfolding before them. Jasmine Crockett stepped forward with a calm that seemed almost impossible in a chamber charged with tension. Across the room, Kash Patel leaned into the microphone, arrogance radiating from every gesture, convinced he had the upper hand. Words had already flown like daggers, accusations volleyed back and forth, each more cutting than the last. The air was thick with anticipation, a storm barely contained. Waiting for the spark that would ignite it all, Patel smirked, certain of his dominance. Ready to dismiss Crockett with a cutting remark that had silenced many before her, but then she spoke. Her voice was steady, unwavering, slicing through the tension like a blade. "But remember what it says in Proverbs," she began, her tone measured, commanding attention. "Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. For the rights of all who are destitute." The words hung in the air, heavy with purpose. Patel froze mid-sentence, the smirk fading, replaced by a flicker of unease. The chamber, packed with witnesses, aides, and journalists, seemed to collectively inhale. The sound of papers shifting, a chair squeaking, the subtle coughs that punctuate tense silence, all of it dissolved into a single moment of stunned attention. One quote, one sentence, and the arrogance that had dominated the room moments ago seemed to waver, and exposed. Then the reaction hit. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, growing louder until the entire room erupted in applause. Some rose to their feet, others covered their mouths in disbelief, while whispers of admiration threaded through the air. Cameras flashed, phones captured the moment, social media feeds would ignite within seconds with the sheer weight of what had just transpired. Crockett's eyes met Patel's, calm and resolute, unflinching. A quiet force of moral certainty in the eye of political chaos. And in that instant, the balance shifted. The chamber, once dominated by tension and hostility, now hummed with a new energy. Respect, fear, and awe mingled together as everyone realized this was not just another debate. This was a moment that would ripple far beyond these walls. But what happened next left the entire chamber in stunned silence. The chamber was no longer just a room filled with lawmakers and aides. It had become a crucible of values, identity, and power. Every decision, every word spoken here could reverberate far beyond the marble walls and gilded ceilings. Jasmine Crockett's bold declaration had not merely paused. Kash Patel, mid-argument, had cracked open the facade of a debate that had been simmering beneath the surface for weeks. This was more than a clash of two politicians. It was a collision of ideologies, of visions for a nation grappling with its identity, its conscience, and its future. Outside the chamber, the tension was already palpable. News outlets scrambled to capture the spectacle. Live streams were shared in real time, and hashtags began to surge across social media platforms. Hashtag Crockett confronts Patel trended within minutes, each post amplifying the stakes and spreading awareness far beyond the walls of Congress. The nation watched, riveted, as if every citizen sensed that this was no ordinary hearing. Every tweet, every retweet, carried a pulse of anticipation, a shared breath of suspenses. Americans across the country wondered who would emerge morally victorious. The deeper context only made the confrontation more explosive. Patel had been positioning himself as a gatekeeper, a figure representing unchecked power and the loud voice of entrenched privilege. He had repeatedly attacked the credibility of those who dared to challenge him, using every tool at his disposal, vertiginal maneuvers and sheer intimidation. For many, he had become the embodiment of a system that silenced dissent, marginalized voices, and dismissed the struggles of ordinary people. Against this backdrop, Crockett was not merely speaking for herself. She was speaking for millions whose concerns had long been ignored. Her words carried the weight of generations who had fought for recognition, justice, and equality, making her every syllable a challenge to the status quo. Meanwhile, political strategists and analysts watched with bated breath. Editorial rooms buzzed with speculation. Could one carefully chosen quote, delivered with precision and conviction, truly alter the dynamics of a public figure renowned for aggression? Could this single moment ignite a shift in perception, not only for Crockett's supporters, but for the wider audience skeptical of political theater? The tension was layered, part spectacle, part genuine moral reckoning. Every observer knew that a misstep, a stumble, or a faltering voice could change the outcome entirely. As tensions reached a boiling point, few could predict what was coming. Crockett's calm composure contrasted sharply with Patel's growing agitation, creating a visual and moral polarity that amplified every glance, every gesture, every pause. The stakes were no longer abstract. They were personal, political, and cultural. The room itself seemed to hum with possibility, as if the very air acknowledged the gravity of what was unfolding. With every heartbeat, the audience, both present and virtual, waited for the next move, for the decisive turn that would determine not only who won the debate, but whose values would resonate most profoundly across a nation hungry for courage and truth. And just as the suspense reached its peak, with every eye locked on the two figures at the center of this moral crucible, a whisper ran through the chamber, an unspoken acknowledgement that the moment was about to escalate into something history would not forget. Kash Patel's ascent had been meteoric, marked by a relentless drive and an uncanny ability to command attention. From the earliest days of his political career, he cultivated an image of authority and certainty, projecting confidence that few dared to question. His public appearances were calculated, his speeches sharp, and his criticisms often merciless. To his supporters, he was a fearless advocate, afraid to challenge the establishment and speak boldly in defense of his beliefs. But to those who observed more closely, Patel's brilliance was paired with a pattern of aggression that bordered on arrogance and a willingness to exploit divisions for personal gain. Throughout his tenure in various government positions, Patel had built a reputation as a master of rhetoric and a strategist of intimidation. In committee hearings, he often leaned forward, voice rising, eyes narrowed, signaling both authority and impatience. Colleagues who attempted to challenge him frequently found themselves interrupted, dismissed, or publicly undermined. Patel's style was unmistakable: dominate the room, command the narrative, and leave little space for dissent. Yet beneath this aggressive exterior, there were patterns that spoke of moral contradictions. Moments where his actions betrayed the values he claimed to uphold. There were hearings where Patel's words had sparked outrage. Comments dismissed the concerns of marginalized communities, framed inconvenient truths as exaggerations, and at times implied that empathy was a weakness. Each statement, though polished, carried the undertone of dismissal, subtly reinforcing hierarchies and consolidating his power among those who valued assertiveness over accountability. To the public, these moments were controversial but calculated. To those who followed closely, they revealed a deeper pattern: and insistence on control and a tendency to prioritize image over integrity. Patel's career was also marked by public confrontations that further cemented his persona. Instances where he challenged whistleblowers or dismissed investigative reporting became case studies in his uncompromising approach. Headlines chronicled clashes, quotes circulated widely on social media, and each controversy seemed only to strengthen his base. For supporters, these were demonstrations of courage and tenacity. For critics, they were evidence of a moral blind spot and a readiness to exploit every opportunity to maintain influence. His reputation was carefully curated, blending charisma with intimidation, ensuring that very few dared to confront him head-on till now. Yet even as Patel exuded dominance, cracks had begun to appear, subtle yet undeniable. Moments of overconfidence led to missteps, lapses in judgment revealed inconsistencies, and his aggressive style sometimes backfired in ways that exposed vulnerabilities he could not entirely control. While the public saw a figure unshakable, insiders noted the quiet unease, the fleeting glances of doubt, and the rare but telling signs that his carefully constructed armor was not impervious. Each past miscalculation, each controversial statement, created a foundation that could be challenged if only someone with courage and clarity dared to confront it directly. But behind the confident facade, cracks were forming that few had noticed. Patel's carefully maintained image of unassailable authority had yet to meet someone who would not flinch. Someone whose moral conviction could cut through pretense and expose the underlying contradictions. The stage was set for a reckoning. and the moment of truth was approaching faster than anyone in the chamber could anticipate. Every past act of arrogance, every controversial statement, every carefully delivered insult was about to collide. With a force that had been waiting for its moment, it's a force that would not simply counter him but redefine the narrative entirely. Jasmine Crockett's journey was far from ordinary. Born into a family that understood the weight of struggle and the value of perseverance, she grew up witnessing both the injustices that society could inflict and the resilience required to confront them. Her parents instilled in her a sense of duty, not only to herself, but to the community around her. Every lesson she absorbed, every story she heard, shaped a foundation built on integrity, courage, and an unshakable belief in justice. From a young age, she understood that true leadership was not a matter of ambition alone, but of responsibility, of standing unwaveringly for what was right, even when doing so invited scrutiny or risk. Crockett's early years in education reflected this drive, excelling academically while navigating the challenges of a society that often underestimated her potential. She cultivated a mindset of focus and determination. She understood that intellect alone would not suffice. Empathy, strategic thinking, and moral clarity were equally crucial. These lessons propelled her into law, where she saw firsthand the systemic inequities that marginalized voices endured daily. It was here, in the courtroom, that her commitment to truth and advocacy truly crystallized. She became known not just for her legal acumen, but for her capacity to listen, to champion the overlooked, and to fight for those whose struggles were too often ignored. Her legal career was marked by landmark cases where she defended the vulnerable and challenged entrenched power structures. Each victory was not merely a personal achievement. It was a statement about the value of diligence, power of conscience, and the importance of moral courage. Colleagues and clients alike began to recognize in Crockett a rare combination: intellectual precision to dissect complex arguments and the moral clarity to navigate them with integrity. In every courtroom, she demonstrated that strength could coexist with compassion, that authority need not rely on intimidation, and that standing firm in principle was a form of power more enduring than rhetoric alone. Beyond the courtroom, Crockett's commitment to her community further defined her path. She immersed herself in initiatives that addressed inequity, education, and social justice, understanding that change could not emerge from isolation, but from sustained engagement with the people most affected. She mentored youth, advocated for policy reforms, and stood at the forefront of movements demanding accountability from those in positions of influence. Through these efforts, she developed an acute awareness of the intersection between policy and lived experience, between law and the human condition. Her leadership was not performative. It was cultivated from real struggle, from listening, learning, responding with unwavering resolve. Crockett's preparation for confrontation was therefore not an accident. It was forged through years of disciplined study, public service, and community engagement. Every debate she had participated in, every public statement she had made, every challenge she had navigated, contributed to a readiness that went far beyond political strategy. When she faced Kash Patel, she did so not from a place of ego or spectacle, but from a lifetime of preparation, grounded in principle, informed by experience, and guided by a moral compass that refused to be swayed by bluster or intimidation. It was these very struggles that would give her the strength to deliver a moment history wouldn't forget. Every setback she had endured, every voice she had amplified, every instance where she had stood firm against injustice, had honed her capacity to confront arrogance with dignity, aggression with calm, and misinformation with truth. Crockett had become more than a politician. She had become a symbol of resilience and integrity, embodying the possibility that one voice, when fortified by principle and courage, could challenge the loudest opposition as the chamber filled with tension. As Patel leaned forward with the weight of past victories and assumed dominance, Crockett's presence radiated something entirely different: the quiet certainty of someone who knew her purpose and had earned her authority through relentless dedication. She was prepared not merely to respond, but to transform the moment, to turn confrontation into moral clarity, and to demonstrate that courage, knowledge, and integrity could prevail where arrogance and intimidation had long held sway. And as the room waited for the next exchange, every observer, both present and watching from afar, felt the gravity of what was about to occur. Because in that silence, poised between challenge and response, the culmination of years of struggle, of study, and of service coalesced into a force that was about to redefine the very meaning of leadership and justice. The air in the chamber grew thick, almost suffocating as the debate escalated. Every word, every gesture carried weight, charged with the unspoken understanding that this was more than a simple exchange of ideas. Kash Patel leaned into the microphone again, his voice sharp, cutting through the room with practiced force. "Let's be honest," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Some of these claims are nothing more than theatrics. You can quote scripture all you want, but policy requires facts, not moral lectures." His smirk was deliberate, a signal that he believed he had the upper hand, that he could unnerve anyone who dared challenge him. But Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. She listened, absorbing the jabs, the interruptions, the attempt to dominate the conversation. Her composure was striking, almost unnerving to those watching. She maintained eye contact, her posture calm and deliberate, signaling a quiet confidence that contrasted sharply with Patel's aggressive energy. The tension between them was palpably a clash of temperament, of philosophy, of moral weight. Every time Patel raised his voice or attempted a rhetorical jab, Crockett's silence held its own power, refusal to be drawn into chaos. Patel's tactics became more pronounced as the minutes passed. He interrupted, cutting her off mid-sentence, each time trying to regain control, to assert dominance over the narrative. "Come on, Congresswoman," he sneered at one point. "You really think that invoking scripture changes the facts?" His words carried the sharp edge of mockery, but they also revealed a subtle, innocent, implicit acknowledgement that Crockett's calm authority was harder to dismiss than he had anticipated. The room reacted in whispers and sideways glances. Sensing the unspoken struggle for control, Crockett responded only when necessary, choosing her words with precision, allowing each phrase to land with deliberate clarity. She did not attack. She did not escalate. Instead, she reframed, pointing to principles and truths that were difficult to counter without revealing contradictions. The audience, both present and watching remotely, could sense the shift. Where Patel relied on volume and intimidation, Crockett relied on substance, integrity, and moral clarity. With every measured response, the tension rose, like the tightening of a spring poised to release. Observers in the chamber began to lean forward, sensing that the exchange was approaching a pivotal moment. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras panned across faces etched with anticipation. The hum of suppressed excitement grew louder. The contrast between Patel's bluster and Crockett's composed determination created a visual and emotional tension that held everyone captive. Each interruption, each pointed remark from Patel, only amplified the suspense, making it clear that a decisive turn was imminent. And then, just as Patel raised his voice once more, confident that he had unsettled his opponent, Crockett's eyes locked with his, steady and unwavering. The room seemed to pause, as though collectively holding its breath. Every person present could sense that the moment of reckoning, the point where rhetoric would either collapse under scrutiny or be shattered by truth, was imminent. The clash of arrogance against integrity, of intimidation against resolve, had reached its apex. The chamber held its breath, knowing something monumental was about to unfold. For a heartbeat, the chamber seemed suspended in time. Kash Patel leaned forward, his jaw tight, voice poised to deliver yet another cutting remark, convinced that the moment was his to command. But Jasmine Crockett did not rush. She did not react impulsively. Instead, she inhaled deeply, her gaze sweeping across the room with quiet authority. The tension was almost unbearable. Every observer could feel the weight of history pressing down, the expectation of something extraordinary, and the subtle, almost electric anticipation that the next words might change everything. Then, with a calmness that commanded attention, she spoke. "As it is written," she began, her voice steady, resonant, carrying an unspoken power that silenced Patel mid-sentence. Proverbs reminds us, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. For the rights of all who are destitute, the chamber went still. Even the clicking of pens, the shuffling of papers, seemed to fade into nothingness. Patel blinked, momentarily disarmed, his earlier smirk gone, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. The weight of her words, simple, precise, morally unassailable, landed like a hammer striking an unyielding surface. Every person present felt it. The clarity, the undeniable resonance of truth articulated with unwavering confidence. A murmur ran through the crowd. Then another. Whispered phrases of disbelief and admiration swelled into a collective roar of reaction. Did she just... wow. She just shut him down. Phones were raised, cameras snapped, the digital feeds of social media lit up in real time. #Crockett mic drop trended within minutes. Short clips circulated, showing the moment again and again, each replay amplifying the power of the gesture. The crowd's energy surged, a tidal wave of applause that seemed to shake the very air of the chamber. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, some covering their mouths in awe, others exchanging glances of incredulity. Patel's face tightened. He attempted to recover, to muster a response that would regain control, but the room no longer followed him unquestioningly. His words faltered, interrupted by the echo of Crockett's statement and the swelling reaction from the audience. For the first time in the debate, the dynamic had shifted entirely. What had been tension and aggression now hung precariously in the balance. With Crockett's moral authority tipping the scales, the quiet confidence in her eyes, the deliberate pacing of her speech, the unwavering certainty in her tonette was a display of dominance that had nothing to do with volume or bluster and everything to do with integrity, preparation, and courage, as she continued. She expanded on her point, connecting the biblical wisdom to the present moment and the broader issues at hand. Each sentence was deliberate, each pause strategically placed to allow comprehension to settle, to let the weight of truth resonate. The chamber listened, captivated, caught between the audacity of Patel's previous aggression and the undeniable power of Crockett's moral clarity. The applause would rise intermittently, punctuated by nods of agreement, murmurs of admiration, and the occasional gasp at the precision of her argument. Outside the chamber, the moment exploded across digital platforms. Clips went viral within seconds. Analysts dissected every word. Commentators debated her phrasing, her timing, and the rhetorical mastery on display. Tweets poured in from citizens, politicians, journalists, and activists alike. Jasmine Crockett just redefined courage in Congress. One quote, one truth. One unstoppable force. Patel couldn't handle that moral clarity. Social media feeds became a chorus echoing the astonishment, respect, and admiration of millions watching in real time. Patel attempted to regain composure, his face tightening with frustration. He interjected, but his words were hollow, lacking the precision, the gravitas, and the resonance of Crockett's delivery. Each attempt to dominate was met with calm refutation or deliberate silence. Crockett's strategy was not to escalate, but to demonstrate a higher order of power, the kind that does not need to shout to command attention. With every failed attempt to disrupt her flow, Patel's authority eroded further. The audience's alignment with Crockett intensified. The chamber itself seemed transformed. What had begun as a heated debate of political positions became a display of principle. A confrontation between integrity and arrogance. Every person in that room, from seasoned politicians to the newest staffers, could sense the magnitude of the moment. Here, beyond procedure and policy, was a testament to the enduring power of courage, preparation, and moral conviction. The applause became rhythmic, almost ceremonial, as if the chamber collectively acknowledged that a new standard had been set. And in that moment, the entire room witnessed a power greater than politics itself. It was not measured in speeches or legislative wins, but in the sheer moral authority of a woman who had prepared for this confrontation her entire life. Crockett had taken the culmination of years of struggle, education, and service, and in a single, precise delivery, reshaped the narrative. Patel's bluster could not compete with the weight of truth. The chamber responded accordingly. The reverberations of that instant were already spreading, both within the marble walls and far beyond. Social media feeds continued to erupt. Journalists hurried to analyze and replay the moment, and politicians across the spectrum began to whisper about the significance of what they had just witnessed. The power of conviction had triumphed over arrogance. Preparation had vanquished bluster, and integrity had overwhelmed intimidation. Every pause, every deliberate word, every careful look from Crockett had built to this crescendo a moment of undeniable victory. As the applause subsided into a sustained hum of respect and awe, the room remained electric. Even Patel, though rattled, understood the shift that had occurred. This was no ordinary debate. This was a defining moment, one that would be remembered, analyzed, and celebrated. And as the chamber absorbed the magnitude of her triumph, the ripple effects of her words were already beginning to extend outward, setting the stage for a response that would transform public perception, social discourse, and the very narrative of moral authority in that historic debate. By the next morning, every screen and timeline told the same story. Smartphones lit up with notifications, news alerts pinged relentlessly, and social media feeds became a non-stop stream of astonishment, admiration, and debate. Hashtag Crockett mic drop, hashtag truth over bluster, and hashtag Proverbs in action trended nationwide within hours, each post carrying the weight of a moment that had captivated a nation. Memes circulated, capturing Patel's stunned expression side by side with Crockett's calm, commanding gaze, transforming a tense congressional hearing into a cultural touchstone. People from every corner of America shared the clips, overlaying captions like "When integrity speaks, arrogance falters, and this is how courage looks in action." Journalists dissected every nuance of her delivery. Op-eds praised the precision of her rhetoric, the moral clarity she exhibited, and the audacity to stand firm against intimidation. Columnists framed it as a turning point, not just in that debate, but in the broader struggle for representation, justice, and accountability in political leadership. Every major network replayed the moment. Slow-motion analyzes, highlighting the exact pause before she spoke. The way the chamber leaned forward, the subtle shifts in the audience's reactions, it was as if time had been suspended, and everyone watching could feel the gravity of truth being asserted with deliberate power. Celebrities and public figures joined the chorus, posting videos of themselves reacting in awe. Activists celebrated the symbolic victory, framing Crockett's statement as proof that one voice, grounded in principle and moral courage, could challenge a system too often dominated by intimidation and pretense. Across talk shows and podcasts, analysts debated what this moment meant for the broader political landscape. Could one calculated, morally anchored intervention really redefine public perception? The answer, as social media suggested, was a resounding yes. The ripple effect extended far beyond Capitol Hill. Crockett's words became a touchstone for discussions on leadership, justice, and integrity across workplaces, classrooms, and communities nationwide. Americans shared personal stories alongside the clips, explaining how Crockett's courage resonated with their own struggles. Immigrant communities celebrated the affirmation, voice, and dignity, while advocates for marginalized groups praised her insistence on speaking truth to power. In homes, offices, and cafes, people replayed the footage, discussing it not merely as political theater, but as a moral statement, a reminder that steadfastness and principle could prevail over hubris and aggression. Every conversation reinforced the sense that this was more than a debate. It was a cultural reckoning, an affirmation that integrity and courage could not only survive, but dominate in a world often marked by spectacle and performative rhetoric. Meanwhile, Patel's previous reputation of confidence and control began to wobble under the scrutiny of public attention. Social media users dissected past quotes, highlighting contradictions and inconsistencies that now seemed glaringly apparent. Memes and commentary painted him as rattled, even unprepared, reinforcing Crockett's position not just as a victor in that single debate, but as a figure whose clarity and composure set a new standard for public discourse. The contrast was undeniable, and the audience relished it. The satisfaction of witnessing a moral triumph shared. Widely across feeds and timelines, political circles buzzed with private and public speculation. Some lawmakers praised Crockett's courage quietly. Others debated the implications for upcoming legislation or public opinion. Across the country, constituents felt a renewed sense of empowerment. Inspired by the demonstration that principled leadership was possible, that eloquence coupled with moral clarity could reshape the narrative, and that one prepared, steady voice could cut through the noise of aggression and arrogance. Social media amplified every nuance, turning the moment into a shared national experience. By mid-morning, trending hashtags were joined by videos and testimonials from ordinary citizens, celebrating the affirmation of values they held dear: justice, dignity, and the courage to speak for those without power. Across platforms, the story evolved into a narrative of hope, a reminder that integrity could inspire and influence far beyond the chamber walls. Parents showed clips to their children, teachers discussed it in classrooms, and activists shared it as a rallying point for advocacy and awareness. The collective excitement, pride, and sense of connection reinforced Crockett's influence, validating the moral weight of her actions in a way that no speech or press release ever could. In just hours, what began as a single confrontation had transformed into a national phenomenon. The applause from the chamber echoed across screens, hashtags, and conversations, carrying with it the unmistakable message that courage and principle could not only confront arrogance, but redefine it. And as Americans everywhere continued to share, debate, and celebrate the moment, it became clear that Crockett's impact had reached far beyond the walls of Congress, shaping the dialogue, inspiring communities, and setting the stage for a moral reckoning whose effects would be felt for weeks, months, and perhaps years to come. And as the applause faded, one truth remained for the nation to carry forward: courage rooted in principle cannot be silenced. Jasmine Crockett had not simply won a debate. She had illuminated a deeper lesson about the power of integrity, the resilience of moral conviction, and the enduring strength of dignity over arrogance. In that chamber, her calm, deliberate voice had transformed a confrontation into a teaching moment, reminding every observer, both present and watching remotely, that leadership is measured not by volume or theatrics, but by the ability to stand unwaveringly for truth and justice. The moral clarity she displayed transcended politics, spoke to universal values that touch every aspect of human life: the importance of defending those who cannot defend themselves, the courage to challenge injustice, even when the odds seem insurmountable, and the belief that ethical principles can guide action more effectively than intimidation or ego. Crockett's words resonated precisely because they were grounded in lived experience. Informed by years of struggle, community advocacy, and steadfast commitment to justice, in standing for these principles, she reminded the nation that true power lies in righteousness, not dominance, and in moral authority, not spectacle. Audiences reflected on what they had witnessed. Across communities, families discussed the significance of speaking truth to power. Educators used the moment to teach lessons in leadership and ethics. And activists drew inspiration for campaigns, rallies, and initiatives. Crockett's example became a blueprint: preparation.com under pressure. And moral grounding could shift the trajectory of any conflict, whether political, personal, or societal. Her success was proof that a single voice, informed by principle and courage, could ripple outward, influencing perception, conversation, and ultimately action. Her confrontation with Patel also highlighted a fundamental human lesson: arrogance, manipulation, and aggression may dominate momentarily, but they crumble in the face of integrity. Patel's repeated attempts to intimidate and dominate the room had failed not because of luck, but because Crockett had prepared meticulously, acted with intention, and spoke from conviction. The moment was a reminder that ethical fortitude is not passive. It requires awareness, courage, and the readiness to act decisively when tested. The applause, the viral clips, and the social media recognition were not merely reactions. They were validations of a principle far greater than politics itself. At its core, The encounter reaffirmed the value of faith and moral guidance in public life. The single Bible quote she employed was more than a rhetorical flourish. It was a beacon, a demonstration that ethics and spirituality, when married to action, have the capacity to cut through noise and compel recognition. In a society increasingly overwhelmed by spectacle, division, and performative displays, her words became a touchstone, a reminder that honesty, compassion, and clarity remain powerful agents of change. Viewers were reminded that courage rooted in conscience resonates louder than any shouted insult or calculated attack. By reframing a tense confrontation into a lesson in dignity, Crockett also delivered a subtle call to action. She inspired citizens to consider their own roles in fostering justice, to speak boldly for those overlooked or marginalized, and to trust in the enduring power of truth. The moment demonstrated that heroism is not defined by dominance, but by persistence, preparation, and the courage to act when it matters most. Her moral victory became a mirror for society, showing that anyone, regardless of background, can confront wrongdoing with integrity and emerge not just victorious, but exemplary. And as the nation absorbed the lesson, hope surged through audiences in tangible ways. Communities inspired by her courage found renewed energy to engage, discuss, and advocate. Immigrant families, minority communities, and young activists saw in her an embodiment of what is possible when preparation, principle, and bravery converge. The debate, once a heated political skirmish, had evolved into a moral touchstone, a story of resilience and ethical triumph that would echo long after headlines faded. Jasmine Crockett's moment was not just a personal victory, it was a reminder of what a society can achieve when leaders act with integrity, when citizens uphold values over convenience, and when courage is aligned with conscience. And as Americans reflected on what they had witnessed, one truth crystallized clearly: dignity, integrity, and faith are not abstract ideals. They are practical forces, capable of dismantling arrogance, challenging manipulation, and inspiring generations to come. The chamber may have quieted, the applause may have faded, but the lesson endured, leaving a legacy of hope, empowerment, and moral clarity for the nation to carry forward. Now it's your turn to stand for truth and make your voice heard. Jasmine Crockett's moment in that chamber was more than a political confrontation. It was a demonstration of the power of courage, principle, and moral clarity. She reminded us all that standing firm, speaking boldly for those who cannot, and acting with integrity can create ripples far beyond a single room or a single debate. The applause, the viral clips, the headlines, they are not just reactions to her words. They are a reflection of the values she embodies, and a challenge for all of us to carry forward in our own lives. Think about the spaces where your voice matters: the workplace, your community, your social circles. How can you stand for justice, for dignity, for truth, even when it feels like the odds are stacked against you? Crockett's example proves that preparation, courage, and moral grounding can shift not only the conversation, but the culture around you. Every act of integrity, every measured response to arrogance or injustice, sends a signal that values are more than abstract ideas. They are actionable forces capable of change. Share this moment. Discuss it. Let it inspire others. Tag your friends. Post your reflections and keep the conversation alive. The story of Crockett and Patel is not just a single event. It is a blueprint for speaking truth, holding power accountable, and showing that one person's courage can ignite a movement. The question now is yours. Will you remain a bystander, or will you step forward with conviction? The stage is open, the opportunity is here, and the lesson is clear. Speak boldly. Act with integrity. Uphold your values. The nation and the world needs voices like yours to carry the torch of courage, justice, and truth into every corner of our shared future.